Healthcare depends not only on medical and nursing staff, but on neighbours and family. Someone to support you when you fall sick. But what of those people in the inner cities who have no such support? The single parents, the bedsitter students and the old people. In Liverpool, there are 35,000 people over the age of 75, and nearly 1 in 5 of the households consists of a pensioner living alone. Bill Moran, an officer for the City Social Services, describes this problem from his viewpoint.
We have just under 2,000 beds for the whole city in our homes, and when you bear in mind there are 35,000 elderly over 75, 60,000 if you take the over 65s, but the 35,000 is probably the more significant figure. So really, we would like GPs to think of it as being when all other means of maintaining somebody in their own home have failed and the level of risk has become unacceptable. And it can't be said too often that I cannot put somebody into Part 3. I haven't got handcuffs to march them in.
Clinical psychologist Bill Barnes is aware of another sector of the population in Liverpool.
I'm interested in people living alone because they form quite a large percentage of the referrals we get. And it's not just the elderly people. There's an awful lot of young people on their own in this area. Some of them have come to this area because they are lonely. And some are lonely because they're in this area. In that latter group, that would have a lot of students, for example.
Psychologists, health and social service workers clearly have a vocational interest in one-person households. But what of general practitioners? Where does doctoring end and social work begin? Dr. Cyril Taylor.
Are we in danger of becoming social workers and adjuncts to the social services? Well, if doing what I think we should be doing makes us into that sort of person, well, so be it. And I, for one, don't tremble at the thought of regarding much of the medical care system as part of a broader social care system. I think what we're trying to say is that social forces and environmental forces play a huge part in the generation of dis-ease and disorder. Now, in the past, merely treating the dis-ease and sticking an antibiotic on it or a poultice on the boil, if you like, we are only doing a quarter of the job. Does the damp come out on the walls?
Yeah.
Can you see it?
The walls are soaking.
Yeah.
You may find that your own ideas differ from Dr. Taylor's, but the fact remains that the number of one-person households is increasing. Although the inner cities account for most of these, there's also a high concentration of elderly widowed people in the coastal retirement areas. Have you considered what the figures are in your practice? How can it help a doctor to know the different categories and the distribution of people living alone? Mrs. Davis is an elderly person living alone. She's been a patient of Dr. Ross for several years.
Her medical problems are long-standing. She worked for over 50 years in a tobacco factory and smoked a great deal and hasn't got much lung tissue left. She's suffered from severe and relapsing chronic obstructive airways disease. And added to this, since '79, she's had a severe seropositive rheumatoid arthritis, which has added to her misery. And then environmentally, here she is stuck on the second floor of what most people would consider just a normal house. What really would be imperceptible to somebody who wasn't suffering this is, in fact, home imprisonment for her.
Poor health, loneliness and unsuitable accommodation. What can a health team do for such a patient? Dr. Ross.
Well, first of all, I decided to ask Mrs. Davis if she would be prepared to give up smoking altogether. Now, I realised that this really is quite impertinent in a way for somebody who is 69 and has been smoking for 50 years.
Mrs. Davis gave up smoking. Using a nebulizer, her peak flow improved from 45 to 100 litres a minute. The machine was purchased for her with charitable funds identified by Dr. Ross and the practice social worker. With the nebulizer and the drugs for her arthritis and angina, her physical symptoms are kept under control. But what of her isolation?
Environmentally, we are making some progress, albeit rather slowly. She is due for rehousing in the sort of house which would make such a difference to her life. She had her attendance allowance refused twice, and that, on appeal, was eventually won, and that's made a big difference to her expectations about her future. She's at least planning for the future now.
One patient's expectations raised by the skills and perseverance of her general practitioner. How else can this type of patient be helped? Bill Moran from Liverpool Social Services.
Well, the sort of range of services that we have to offer extends from, at one end, a large force of home helps over the city who are able to visit and support elderly people in the community, mainly the single elderly living alone without other support, because there aren't that many home helps for the total amount of population. There's then a number of day centres throughout the city where people can be taken in the social services ambulances. We then have, at the other end of the scale really, the Part 3 homes, the elderly persons' homes.
Sefton Grange is an old people's home in Liverpool. Mrs. Duncan, the matron, explains that they offer more than a permanent residence.
There are other ways of using the home. We have people in for holiday care, and we also have people in for day care. They just come for perhaps 1 day, 2 days a week, and that gives perhaps their daughter or whoever's looking after them just that little break of that they've got time on their own, and it also gives the person coming a chance to see just exactly what it's like.
How can doctors make this service available to their patients?
I think the best way that doctors coming into the area can use Part 3 and can work with the social services is on a basis of cooperation. If we each approach the problems of an elderly person from the point of view of we know best and we're telling you what to do, well, I think the shutters will go up and we'll all get nowhere, and unfortunately, of course, the elderly person will be the one who'll suffer in that. And in this area we have examples of very good practice from GPs, very good liaison, and we sit down together if necessary, have a case conference on somebody, work out just what is needed for that particular person. Others, I'm sorry to say, it's a phone call telling me what I should do and that I should put that person in Part 3.
If good relationships are forged, the links are there for the health and social services to work together for the care of the isolated elderly. Other resources are less accessible. Bill Barnes talks about the district psychology service.
A health centre would need to get in touch with the district psychology service and approach them about having sessions. But that's easier said than done because there's only about 1,000 clinical psychologists in Great Britain, and they're not evenly distributed throughout the country. There's hundreds of them in London, for example. There are some districts where there aren't any. But in major cities, certainly there will be a district service.
Who else can a doctor turn to for help? And what skills does he require to bring these services to the patients who need them most? Over the past 30 years, the mortality and morbidity rates in the UK have been on the decline. If we look at these figures in more detail, we can see marked inequalities in health between the social classes. Perhaps this isn't surprising, but when we look at the relative trends of the health of the different social classes, it is disturbing to find that the gap is widening. What are the causes of the inequalities in health? Is the class gradient inevitable? How can a general practitioner connect her perceptions in the surgery with the concept of social class?
Well, I suppose I can only say the way I experience this here in the practice. The The main problems that we see here are actually, I think, from unemployment and also from the sort of mobility in which people are now travelling around the country looking for jobs. I mean, if you look at health in a context of general well-being, self-esteem rates are very high, and if you're not working and you haven't got money and therefore you can't go out and you haven't got the status of a job, then you start to get depressed and it becomes a vicious circle. I think as a professional you tend to, in a sense, just forget about the everyday problems of people's lives who are not living in a nice warm house with a nice income. And then there's problems of smoking. For example, respiratory disease is much more common in overcrowded conditions and working class people in general. And they're the people who tend to smoke more. I mean, I had a pregnant woman in only last week who smokes 30 or 40 a day. And I was just discussing smoking with her, and she said, in the circumstances, you know, what else is there left for me to do?
Lifestyles, attitudes and expectations of different social classes vary by definition. How can we usefully relate this to disease? The risk of premature death in Class 5 is twice the risk of premature death in Class 1. This can be due to causes as various as accidents, infectious diseases, and respiratory disease. The lower social classes with these high mortality and morbidity rates tend to congregate in the inner city areas. They create the greatest pressure on those health services that can stand it least. How can we stop this vicious circle? Heather Wood is one of these statistics. She moved to Liverpool 8 early in '82 when she was 19. She suffers from epilepsy. Her husband's unemployed and they have few friends in the new neighbourhood. In May '82, she gave birth to her first child. She had a pelvic infection after the delivery and again after a subsequent fitting for a coil. In July, she complained of waking early, generally feeling out of sorts, and having a poor sex life. Her husband is reluctant to take the baby out alone, and she feels that the situation's getting worse. What can a doctor do in the consultation to help patients like Heather Wood? 4 months and several consultations later, Heather attended the surgery with a bad cough.
Oh dear.
Got a bit of a cough and a cold, I'm afraid.
Well, I think it's a bad time of year, isn't it?
Oh, I think the baby gave it to me, actually. He had a bad virus last week. I think he's given it to me this week.
Yeah, it's trouble when you have small children that you do catch things off them.
Yeah.
And then they catch things off you. Sort of vicious circle.
Yes, I'm afraid so.
Like Heather tonight, I gave her some Linctus codeine and steam inhalations, and okay, the steam is what works for the steam inhalations, but it's wonderful if you've got menthol and eucalyptus to put in it because it smells nicer, and if you take some Linctus codeine then you will sleep better, and I mean that's what I take when I have my cough. And those kind of things are very important because if you're staying away all night coughing, then you can't cope with the rest of the day and the baby and everything else. Because you were feeling a bit sort of stuck in and...
Yeah, well, it gets me out the house now. I'm not stuck in. I don't have to sort of put the baby in the pram and go to wander around the park on my own or wander up around the shops. And it gets you out meeting people. I've met people there as well. So I find it has helped me.
And she's had a lingering sort of postnatal depression, which really I think I've been a bit slow in picking up because it's just been things are not right and I'm not really myself, and it suddenly dawned on me, you know, obviously this is what it is. But a lot of it is made worse by the two of them were just in a tiny flat, stuck in with each other and with very little money to go out. So you sort of say, well, why don't you get out and about? Answer is no money. And it does sound as though things are improving.
I found home very good. I could go in, they'd hold the baby for a while. You know, even though I was in the same room as him, just gave me a break instead of having to hold him or just see to him all the time. And I found them very helpful. They'll sit and listen to anything, you know, any problems that you'll have. And, you know, they're just friendly, you know, they're not sort of, oh, shove you to one side, you know, things like that. They really are friendly, and they're willing to help you, you know, involve you in activities and everything, and I find it smashing.
You could say that had perhaps got better on its own, but I think a major factor in it getting better was that we got her involved with Home Link, because she completely lost confidence and she was being very agoraphobic and she was stuck in the house, apart from coming to the surgery. And coming here once a week wasn't, apart from us giving her tablets, wasn't really increasing her confidence that she could do things. Whereas gradually she's taken things into her own hands over the last year. And I think that that has, if you like, I mean, it's saved us lots and lots of consulting time, because she's been out and about doing things for herself and seeing that she can actually do things, that she's not completely helpless.
And I said, take the baby with you, because he was going up to his brother's. And he said, no. I said, why? He said, well, just say kids start throwing stones at the baby. I said, Pete, that could happen with me. You know, things like that. And even if we're sort of out together going to the shops, and I'll say, you know, you push him down to so-and-so, I've got to go to the greengrocers. And he said, no, it's all right, I'll wait outside. He just doesn't seem to want to push him.
No.
I suppose when he's older and he's walking, no, I'll have no trouble palming him off on him.
Do you think it's because he doesn't want to be seen with the baby, or do you think he's a bit frightened of
I
taking
just
the baby
don't
out?
know. You know, because you can walk up and down, you see plenty of fellas pushing prams and pushchairs and what have you. Even his brother does it, I just don't know what it is.
No.
But
Because I suppose it's something that's going to come, because but it's no. I mean, that was one of the things that I was sort of talking about. But obviously, he's got to decide to do it. There's nobody that can say, "Oi, you know, you've got to change."
yeah,
Still, maybe if you're getting on better anyway, things will gradually.
it's not too bad now, you know, I can just sort of go up to Home Link and have a good moan or somebody up there.
The tree house around here is that her mother does live around here, but her husband also became unemployed at the same time, and she's very young and she's also epileptic, and the two of them were stuck in together.